Hi, I'm Blake Kuwahara, and I'm here at my home in Sausalito, California. And Sausalito is just a little town. We only have 7,000 residents, just on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge in the Bay Area. So we're just about 15 minutes from San Francisco, and I also live part-time in LA in West Hollywood. So I want to welcome you to my home and just give you a little peek. This is the living room here. It's filled mostly with flea market finds, and this is the dining room / my office when I'm here working in the Bay Area. So I wanted to really thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about my professional background, to give you a sense of my point of view, and also talk a little bit about my eyewear collection. So as you may know, I'm an optometrist by training and profession. I went to UC Berkeley School of Optometry, and then I was in private practice down in Manhattan Beach, California, which is down in LA. And one of my practice management responsibilities was to oversee the optical section of our business, the dispensary and the opticians. And I very quickly found that I enjoyed being more in the front of the house with the eyewear and the product than I did in the back of the house in a dark room seeing patients. And during that time, just by chance, I happened to meet the owner of an LA-based eyewear company, and they were looking for a creative director. And even though I had no practical experience designing eyewear, I had a great passion and love for it. He felt that I had the aesthetic sensibility to do the job and that he could teach me the technical aspects. And so that was in 1990. And that was really the first opportunity I had to get into eyewear design. And our industry is kind of interesting that we don't have any direct pathways into designing eyewear. It's not like the fashion industry or the jewelry industry where you can actually go to school to learn how to do those things. In eyewear, we don't have that. So it's interesting how different people get into eyewear design, but that was sort of my pathway. And I was very fortunate that he also gave me the opportunity to design and develop my own eyewear collection. That was called Kata Eyewear. And we launched in 1992. And that was really at the very beginning of the boutique segment of the industry taking off. And so I was kind of right there at the very beginning. We had a great customer base and celebrity base, and sold to fashion retailers like Barney's New York, Takashimaya, Browns in London, United Arrows in Tokyo, and had a really nice following. And that company was sold about 20 years ago, quite a long time. Don't do the math, you can figure out how old I am. But I was then hired as creative director for REM Eyewear, an LA-based company. And one of my responsibilities there was to help integrate the different departments within our company. So I oversaw the creative direction of the product development, creative direction of the marketing, and also integrated with sales. And a lot of eyewear companies don't integrate product marketing and sales. And I wanted to make sure that we told a very consistent story for each of our brands. And I was there for 7.5 years, and then I decided I wanted to take that on sort of a larger platform and do that work for other companies. So I formed a design collective called Focus Group West, and 2 of the eyewear designers I was working with at REM came over with me, the PR agent, and also added 2 graphic designers, 2 architects, and 2 project managers. So we work on projects in a very a comprehensive way, where we integrate our different disciplines, and the people that work within our team, their specialties are brought to the forefront and integrated with all the other different divisions within Focus Group West. So we do everything from create entire brands and design the product and marketing around it, to very discrete projects where it's just logo development, or for instance, produce a photo shoot. The architects do the display work and also retail spaces. We've done about 25 optical boutiques so far. And one of the potential clients that came to us was Bevel. And I've known Richie and Claudio for a really long time. And they were interested in having us collaborate on a small capsule collection for Bevel. And at the same time, I was thinking about designing and developing my own eyewear collection again. And so the conversation kind of turned around, and rather than me design for them, they were more interested in partnering and bringing my collection to market. So we formed a company called Fade to Gray, and we launched the first collection in 2015. And the concept and the reason why the product really came to market was sort of out of selfish needs. I wanted a pair of glasses that I wanted to wear, and a lot of my friends wanted to wear. And a lot of my friends are in the creative space. So they're architects, graphic designers, photographers. And even though they have a creative, artistic side to what it is that they do professionally, they also have a serious business side where they have to conduct sort of the business conversations. And eyewear, as you know, tends to be kind of polarized. It's either very directional in terms of shape and color on one end, or very conservative and vintage on the other. And I felt that there was a void in the marketplace that was really addressing both something that was artful and also wearable. So that's kind of my design mantra. I want to design something that's artful and wearable. And I wanted to also integrate those two different and sometimes opposing aesthetics. So the question was how to do that. And I was shopping one day and I saw this elm vintage Chinese stool that was encased in a clear block of lucite. So essentially it was a stool within a stool. And I thought, wow, this is really brilliant, because here you have something very familiar on the inside, but the outside gives it a completely different context and puts a spin on it, makes it new. So I wanted to take that concept and that idea and do the same thing with eyewear. So it's literally laminating or bringing together two separate frames. One of the big struggling points was the fact that acetate is a live material and it shrinks. And so different colors and different structures have different shrinkage rates. So we had to calculate for each color combination the size of the inner frame and the outer frame, so that when it goes through the shrinkage and the curing process, there's no separation between the inner and the outer component. And once we sort of figured out the calculus for all that, we were able to bring the two pieces together. And the way that we do that is through a process using heat, pressure, and lamination. And the curing time for that is over 2 months. And the temples take even longer, because we have to shoot the wire core once the temple is laminated. But that shooting of the temple core can cause a physical disruption. So we have to make sure that the acetate is extremely stable before we do that. And the temples require quite a bit of work. What we do is we add an extra layer of acetate on the inner tip. And what that does is two things. One is it adds additional weight. And usually you want to reduce the weight of a frame, but the reason why we add weight on the back of the frame is that it adds ballast. So it makes the frame more comfortable to wear. So it's not necessarily about the inherent weight of a frame, but how that weight is distributed. And you want it to be distributed as evenly as possible to get the most comfortable fit. The other advantage to adding an extra layer of material on the tip is it adds a more padding to the back of the head. Our temples are designed differently. They're not designed like a typical skull temple, which is meant to be bent around the ear. This is not meant to be bent around the ear. This is meant to actually hug the back of the ear. And so the additional padding helps to make for a more comfortable and secure fit. We also add additional material on the nose pads. A typical nose pad height is about 7 millimeters. Our nose pad height is 11 millimeters. And that extra bit of material, again, adds extra surface area, so the weight of the frame is more evenly distributed. And the inclination is also designed so that it allows for more universal fit. So someone who has a flatter bridge like myself, the frames actually fit better and are more secure when they're worn. So that's kind of a very important fitting characteristic of our frames. We also miter the end piece at 45 degrees as opposed to 90 or 180 degrees, which is typical for a frame. And the reason for that is because when the frame is closed, you don't have and you don't see the break in the end piece. It's actually hidden in the corner. But that's a tricky thing to do from a craftsmanship and a production standpoint, because the corners have to be crisp enough and sharp enough so they meet at a nice junction but they also have to be polished because they can't be too sharp, otherwise you'll literally cut yourself here. So they can't be over polished because then the corners will be rounded and you're not going to get a crisp fit, but they need to be polished enough so they're not sharp and the edges are rounded just slightly. So that takes a lot of work. So you don't see this very often in eyewear design. You see it more commonly in furniture and in architecture. Again, the frames were designed so that the inner silhouette was something that is kind of familiar and very wearable, but the outer silhouette gives it its sort of characteristic. And it's designed so that when you're far away, you see primarily just the inner silhouette. And as you get closer, you start to see the entirety of the frame and you kind of have that aha moment. And that's what I really wanted with our frames, because my personal design philosophy is that, you know, the eyewear should complement your overall head to toe sensibility, and it shouldn't be a substitute for your personality. I don't like it when eyewear kind of tries too hard. I want it to be sort of a natural part of your look. And so that's how the frames are designed. And we not only use acetate to create a frame and frame, we also use metal. And we use surgical grade stainless steel. And this is actually punched out of one sheet of stainless so that it's more robust. And also there's a very clean line, not only on the front side, but also on the back side as well. And because there's this negative space or this hole or opening on the frame, when it goes through the tumbling and the polishing process, it has to be robust enough, otherwise it'll deform. So that's one of the reasons why we actually punch it out of a sheet of stainless steel. In 2020, we shipped our first collection of the gray label. And the gray label is called the gray label because it's neither black or white. It's kind of gray. So everything else, aside from the frame within the frame concept, I wanted to put into the gray label. And the first design concept that I wanted to bring to market is the bone motif. So this is actually cast like jewelry is cast using a wax cast and molten or liquid metal. So it fills the cavity and you get the three-dimensionality. So you see the design detail not only on the side, but on the top and on the back side. And you can tell that something is cast because you do see it on the top side. If something's just pressed, you only see it on the two sides because of the way the press machine works. You can't see it on top and bottom. Something that's cast, you see the design motif 360 degrees around. So you see it also on the bell cap on the temple end of the frame here. And I always, the reason why I did the bone motif is because I always loved how the articulature of our joints mimicked the articulature of the hinge and the end piece. We also integrate the hinge. The hinge itself is cast into the temple and the end piece. So this is what we call a monoblock end piece. And so it allows for a much more robust and sturdy structure because it's not soldered. It's actually integrated into the end piece and to the temple. And it also allows for a thinner profile. This is the 1012, which we just launched. And this has a nice example of hand finishing here. So this brushwork is all literally done by hand. It's all done with a metal brush, but it's done in such a way that the very top rim is left shiny because I wanted the contrast between the top and the front. So it gives it's a little bit extra dimension to it. Another detail is the logo on the temple tip. So if you can kind of see the logo there, that's actually a modification of my family crest. I'm a fourth generation Japanese American, and we each have a family crest. And my family crest kind of looks like a hashtag, and that represents negative space, which is interesting because the concept that I use in designing my product revolves around positive and negative space. So I wanted to use that for my logo, but modify it. And what we did was we took the shape of the K to create the outer profile of that hashtag. And that's how my logo was developed. And the logo itself is actually a piece of metal. And that metal is then punched out and placed into the temple tip. So we actually first have to use a laser cut to create the space that the metal logo goes into so it doesn't rotate. So it's always in the same position. And then we fill it with clear epoxy, and then we polish. And it's one of those details which is very important to me. When we design the frame, it's not just how the frame looks, but also how it feels in the hand. And it's all about the extra nuance. So one thing that's very important to me are the touch points. So when you take your thumbs and you hold the temple and generally hold it on the bottom, you can feel the sculpting of the temple. It's not just cut out in cookie cutter fashion. And if you feel the back of the frame, you can feel the nuance and the slight curvature that we add. And all of this is just a very subtle way to make the frames feel more special and more loved. And it's kind of a silly thing, but I always like to make sure that our frames are developed and designed with love, and you can feel the love in the frames by touching them, by feeling them, because for me it's just as important that the frames look good, but they feel good on, and that the people that are wearing them feel good wearing them. And so it's about the passion that we bring to our product. And I think all the brands that you carry in your boutique all have a story. To me, it's really important that brands have a point of view, that brands have a story, that it's personal to the designer. And so I wanted to share sort of some personal background and information about me so that you can help to explain that to your customers.